Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guests today are Alan Hill, Director of Telecommunications at the General Services Administration. Sanjay Gupta is the Chief Technology Officer of the Small Business Administration. Stephen Grunch is Branch Chief for Enterprise Cloud Services at U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. And Zain Ahmed, Vice President and General Manager, Civilian Sales for CenturyLink. It's good to have you all here today. And let's start with where the agencies are in respect to migration of applications to the cloud. And I ask that in the context of we're not where we were 10 years ago. Email, okay, fine, that's in the cloud. But now as higher and higher level and more mission critical applications move there, I want to get a sense of how you think about what application comes next, given the long tail of development and management that might follow that application migration. So Steve, why don't we start with you?
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate the invite. So one of the things that GSA has been involved with is helping to create a application rationalization playbook. We did that with working with the Federal CIO Council and also OMB. That is a great tool that agencies can leverage to help rationalize the applications that are ready to move to the cloud and those that maybe need a little bit more work.
Or maybe those you kill off altogether.
Absolutely, that's correct. And then, coming from my previous agency, I was working with 3 cloud providers and what we were providing to the agency. And we did a lot of our own legwork, but coming to GSA, I got exposed to the Cloud Information Center. And there at gsa.gov/CIC, they have a group of GSA experts. They have best practices out there. And they have the cloud providers where it provides a huge amount of information. So a lot of the legwork agencies might be trying to do themselves. If they can just go out there and they can probably find a lot of the answers that they've been searching for to help solve some of their business problems.
But what would you say, without reading the whole playbook, would be the top 2 things to consider when deciding, doing that rationalization? This one moves, this one stays, this one we turn it off and see who screams.
So one is the customer experience. Is it going to impact the customer experience? Because that experience of how the customer leverages, we're going to be changing the business practices of what the process is, what they're used to using. And are they ready for that? Is it able to meet their mission needs? The other thing is can it integrate into the network? Beyond just taking an application that is a software as a service and move it into the cloud, you got to take in consideration the security aspect, the network and how it traverses the network and how it gets to the end user. So it's extremely to look at things holistically, not just from an application aspect.
Okay, good. Sanjay.
So in terms of, from SBA's perspective, we've basically adopted our cloud first policy and a cloud smart policy now, as it's renamed. And what that means is, for us, the default is in the cloud. Now, let me be a little clearer about what that means. Is our vision is to get to the software as a service model to the extent possible. But we're not quite there yet. So as I speak today, we are a smattering of infrastructure as a service, which is probably our predominant model today, some platform as a service, and some software as a service. Some of the core applications at the SBA, like our financial applications, our loan processing and loan servicing applications, which are in some ways legacy applications and they are core for the SBA, we are looking at ways to how we can move them to a cloud footprint. And naturally, that'll be a slow and transition path. It'll be a deliberate path. And so we're evaluating how we should be looking to move those.
Because that's really central to the service you provide to the small businesses that have the loans, is those processing and application systems. And those are pretty dated in general?
Correct, that's true. And so one of the things we also do at the SBA is our disaster support. So one of our key applications that supports, it's called Disaster Credit Management System, is also being modernized, and it is moving into the cloud in a more of a software as a service model. But some of the ancillary applications that make up that ecosystem for our disaster support are still on premises, and we're working to figure out a way to migrate them to the cloud as well.
And in the case of those legacy apps, and we'll discuss this maybe more in detail later on, but is the consideration that how it was developed originally in the architecture for which it was developed, that must be a consideration.
It does, and sometimes since they are core and they're foundational to the enterprise, they have, if you will, their tentacles connecting to the other parts of the enterprise. So it's not an easy to just rip it out and replace it with a new solution. So you have to take care of the interfaces. The interfaces at times in these cases run out to other agencies, for example, to the Treasury, for example. And so you have to be looking into what are the second level and the third level implications of making these upgrades. So we're looking at it in a methodical way, and we're looking to see how we can make progress towards it. And obviously we're trying to do the crawl, walk, run approach here. But again, we're taking a very aggressive stance as it relates to modernization into the cloud at the SBA.
But safe to say it is an active, front of mind, top of mind effort for the whole technology operation.
Oh, absolutely. And when we say cloud first and cloud smart, that's our default. So today, or for the last 2+ years, if there's an application that is mostly in an on-premises model, our default is it should be in the cloud. So I'll give you for instance of some of the cases we have had applications that were selected or they needed to be implemented for the SBA's business needs. So we figured out a way to say, let's make sure we can move them and implement them in the SBA cloud as opposed to implementing them in the SBA on-premises environment. So that was a conscious choice because we do believe that the benefits of the cloud outweigh the default standard to say, okay, let's do it in on-premises. That's an easy way to do it. But we made the conscious choice to do that. So it is a deliberate approach for us.
Okay, good. And Steve, I think of USCIS as maybe one of the last bastions of a lot of paper in the forms, and I know the agency has been working very hard to get some of those digitized and starting with some common forms. So give us a sense of where you are.
Sure, thank you, Tom. So from a high level, yes, one of our major initiatives at USCIS is to create an e-processing capability where all of the intake forms are digitized. As part of that, though, there's been a long history at USCIS of moving to the cloud. Today, nearly all of the applications in the portfolios that we have some presence in the cloud. We have adopted a cloud native or cloud first strategy several years ago. We have embraced the cloud as an opportunity to provide a more secure environment for our applications by leveraging the tools that are available in the cloud service providers. And the exceptions that are coming about are becoming less and less for us. In addition to that, we are also leveraging several new technologies. Most of the applications today that we're moving to the cloud as part of e-processing are built on microservices. We're reutilizing code across different development units and reutilizing different services across the different legacy application stacks. So even though we do have a legacy of paper, USCIS is probably one of the front runner agencies that are using cloud.
Okay. And Zaid, you look across government in your work, and what are the trends you're seeing, again, being very specific, 2019, and as we go into the second half of the year and almost to the end of the fiscal?
Yeah, great question. So we're seeing there was a big rush to the cloud, and some of it is kind of coming back now, where they're looking at kind of repatriating the applications back into their data centers, especially the high-value assets that they have. That probably has to have some rationalization if it needs to move to the cloud, and some legacy applications as well. Either they need to be redeveloped or re-architected and tested and then deployed in a cloud environment. So there's a mix of that. The second thing that we're seeing is that folks rush to one cloud provider, one CSP, and now they're looking at options, multiple cloud providers, Amazon and Microsoft Azure and HP. So looking at Google across the board and even kind of combining that into their data center and looking at a portfolio of clouds, right? Mm-hmm. And the essential piece of it becomes how do you manage across that many portfolio of applications across different cloud providers. We've seen an uptick in that, and we've developed an application called Cloud Application Manager, which helps customers manage multiple cloud hybrid environments as well as their existing data center to optimize workloads across the board.
Okay, and we'll get more into the management aspects as we talk throughout this session. But I guess maybe this follow-on question I would have is, what have you learned so far? I mean, what in this whole migration effort and developing the playbook, did you not anticipate that maybe has come up? Because There's always something with IT. Like in this case of the tentacles, you don't know what's going to break down the line when you do this here, and all of a sudden something doesn't come back from where the tentacle was, that kind of thing. Alan?
Sure. So the first thing is not all cloud providers are the same. And being able to understand how the services are delivered from each of the cloud providers is important in deciding how you develop a hybrid cloud model. I'll go back to where you talked about for the past 10 years we've been running down this path of cloud migration. And I'll say now that cloud smart strategy gets it right. Mm-hmm. The focus on the security, the procurement, and the workforce is extremely important. Security, for some reason, I'll dive into that a little bit. It seems to be second thought, and a lot of times when we go out and do things, and it can't be. It's in this day and age, we got to really focus on making sure that we bring the types of security tools. It can be costly, and when you're trying to manage security within a data center, and on top of where you have multiple cloud providers, you need to come with a common set of tools. For example, in our EIS contract vehicle, we have managed security services that help bridge that between data centers and the cloud providers. In addition, we have a security team that GSA.gov IT security that has a wealth of information of best practices and things that you need to take in consideration when you begin going into a multi-cloud environment. And particularly that the fact that our team is teamed with DHS and what their best practices and policies that need to be, and us coming up with the types of solutions that help solve those type of needs for the customers.
Okay. Sanjay, what have you found that maybe didn't anticipate, especially, well, you mentioned the tentacles.
Right. So I think I'd start with as Alan was mentioning about security, one of the things we adopted was security by design. So it's not an afterthought. And I'll talk a little later on about our cybersecurity vision to protect all IT assets within SBA. But this we're talking about challenges. So one of the things I would say in the cloud environment is it's kind of a plus and a minus both. The pace of change and introduction of new products and services, and doesn't matter which cloud service provider or CSP you're talking about, is pretty intense. And almost on a weekly, on a monthly basis, new products and service offerings are being created and being made available to customers. So that's a good thing, obviously. The bad side of that is trying to keep up with that is a challenge in of itself. So that's one of the things we realized, that you have to be reassessing some of those choices and decisions you have made, say 2 years ago even for that matter, and be able to re-examine them in light of the new product and service offerings. Number two, I would say, is the fact that we have an acute shortage of skilled resources, engineering resources in the cloud, design people, architecture folks, and obviously cybersecurity folks as well. So that's another issue that we are all facing with, which is a pretty large issue in terms of you don't have the right skills, and kind of goes hand in hand with the first one that I talked about. Number three, I'd say, is, which kind of probably goes to what Zane's firm offers, is connectivity. The fact of the matter is that when you're in a cloud or multiple clouds, you need to rely on a high-speed network connectivity to get to your cloud and be able to get the performance you're expecting. And because of the nuances involved in connecting to the clouds, our experience at the SBA was that took us a long time to get the fast connectivity established to the cloud. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things we share at the SBA is our story and our Art of the Possible story, which we've shared with many agencies about how we did it, what did we learn from it, and how can you avoid the pitfalls and the challenges that we came across. And last but not the least, the most important aspect in the cloud journey is having strong, committed executive sponsorship. And let me be very specific of what that means. At SBA, our OCIO leadership team was committed, and they had the conviction to move forward with it, to the extent that we actually ended up burning up bridges behind as we were on a cloud journey back in 2017, because we knew we needed to get there, and we knew there was no going back to it. That takes a lot of conviction, that takes a lot of confidence, and it takes a lot of commitment on the leadership to make those bold moves. So I think that's one of the things I see as I talk with other colleagues, that commitment and that confidence from the executive team sometimes is not adequate enough. This requires you to be all in, so to speak,
Sure.
and be very convinced that this is the right path for you.
And Steve, did you find that also there's a human capital issue, learning, knowledge, and also the cloud agility or intercloud portability maybe is a better word for it. Those are things you've encountered also?
Yes, just to echo what other panelists have said, our lessons learned have fallen under these categories of the financial aspect, contracting specifically, the technical aspect of designing the network, and also refactoring applications as they move into the cloud. For example, if we take an application from a data center and move it into the cloud, we have to have people that recognize that the cloud infrastructure is different, that different skills are required to build automated infrastructure in the cloud environment, and to optimize that, right? Again, with the security piece of it, that has been a critical piece of our infrastructure and to support our cloud environments across the board. The other thing that I would say that we've learned over time is that governance is important at the beginning of the process. We needed to develop communities of excellence because of the number of people that are actively in our cloud environment. In USCIS, we have multiple vendors, multiple contractors that are accessing different portions of the cloud environment, and having a landing zone, if you will,
Sure.
to bring a focal point or a set of ground rules to everyone was important at the beginning of the process.
Okay, I'm going to take a short break at this point, and Zaid, I have a lot of follow-up questions for you and you all, but let's take a break right now. I'm your moderator, Tom Temin, here on the panel discussion, How Agencies Are Reducing IT Complexities in a Multi-Cloud World, sponsored by CenturyLink, here on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network.